Bitcoin's interesting because it's kind of the first time where we invented fast settlement, which is to say that as long as the network remains reasonably decentralized, I can send you value, and within 10, 20, 30 minutes, your Bitcoin is confirmed on chain, and I have no way to pull that back. It's kind of final settled unless the majority of miners decide to start reversing transactions and things like that. And so that's kind of the first true possibility for finding that solution. But then, of course, it has to go through this very long process of being tested, right? So then people make thousands of other cryptocurrencies and they say, well, can these do it better? Gold and silver have kind of like an inbuilt difficulty adjustment, which is that our technology gets better at finding them over time, but we've also mined a lot of the easiest deposits. So the deposits are getting harder, our technology is getting better, but we're not really increasing the supply too quickly. And if you look at gold over the past century, it's ranged between, and this is like World Gold Council data and US Geological Survey data. There's a couple different data sources you can look at, but gold supply is estimated to increase by 1% to 2% per year on average, and it's been a fairly tight band. You have to go back to the gold rush to find when we kind of meaningfully broke above that, and that was in large part because, again, an industrialized culture was coming to a continent that had not been industrialized yet, so they had a lot of low-hanging fruit to pick, kind of in terms of gold mining for at least a period of time. And so basically, through the process of iteration, societies came to see that gold and silver are the best ones. And the main reason why silver held its value is because gold's key limitation was divisibility. Even a small gold coin was worth more than most purchases, so silver was kind of the more daily use metal. And so this only became challenged in the telecommunication era because prior to telecommunications, speed didn't matter. All commodities kind of moved at the same speed. Things like coinage could help speed up the act of weighing and verifying a given commodity. But other than things like that, there wasn't really a big speed difference. But in the telecommunication era, we started to send, and that started in like the mid 1800s with the laying of the long distance telegraph cables. We started to do commerce at large distances very quickly, and so we started abstracting and paperizing everything, and we started kind of getting liftoff away from gold. And so it's kind of the first time we pivoted from a stronger commodity to a weaker commodity, kind of the dollar, like this ledger system it's actually less sound. We spent thousands of years always getting more and more sound, from shells to tobacco to silver to gold. And we kind of started reversing because speed was a new variable that mattered. So yeah, it's not an accident that humans settled on gold for so long. It's because it's the commodity with the highest stock to flow ratio, so how much exists compared to how much can be produced in a year. Mm-hmm. And so it's obviously got very good properties for how much value density you can store in it, how long it lasts when stored. Basically, it's not an accident that all of its properties line up to be good money, and then therefore it's used as good money. And so the way I put it in the book is that fast transactions are an easier problem to solve than fast settlements, right? So if you have Morse code and telegraph, you can do fast transactions. Two people can talk across the Atlantic Ocean and agree on a transaction. And then the settlement is the hard and slow part, sending and verifying gold. Even in the modern era, when Germany repatriated its gold, they expected it to take like 7 years, and they were happy that it only took like 4 years, which is it's kind of a comical number, and it costs millions and millions of dollars worth of logistics and security and auditing and all these things. So settlements have been a problem. One of the things I cover in the book is that Bitcoin's interesting because it's kind of the first time where we invented fast settlement, which is to say that as long as the network remains reasonably decentralized, I can send you value, and within 10, 20, 30 minutes, your Bitcoin is confirmed on chain, and I have no way to pull that back. It's kind of final settled unless the majority of miners decide to start reversing transactions and things like that. And so that's kind of the first true possibility for finding that solution. But then, of course, it has to go through this very long process of being tested, right? So then people make thousands of other cryptocurrencies, and they say, well, can these do it better? Or can someone find a way to hack it? Or how can it be updated over time to be more efficient? And all these things kind of happen, and it's still a very small market. It's only $1 trillion plus market cap in global fiat money is something like 100 trillion. And I think it's a very powerful solution, but it obviously takes time for the market to test it and adopt it. And so as long as we're still in this world where Bitcoin is small, fiat is big, we're still kind of in this weird limbo of, fast transactions, slow settlements. And one of the things you see is that both on an individual level and on a national level, they consider speed to be a variable. So a central bank holds treasuries in large part because they can liquidate them in any kind of business hours. They can just say, we want to sell the treasury and buy back our own currency. Whereas if they're holding gold, it's the logistics of saying, hey, we just want to sell, $10 billion worth of gold right now. It's hard to do logistically. And so they do hold it for a portion of their savings, the part they don't really plan to touch anytime soon, whereas they hold other assets that are faster. And for individuals, they start monetizing things like the S&P 500 or oceanfront real estate or lakefront real estate or fine art, right? There's these other monetary things that kind of compete with gold, even if they're not really money in the traditional sense. They're things that they become our primary store of value. They're more efficient. They are powerful. But a lot of people, especially in developed markets, forget that in developing markets, that's not always available. A middle-class person in Egypt can't easily buy the S&P 500, for example, and their local stock market does not have the same long-term store of value properties. And so in those markets, they gravitate toward physical dollars, ironically, or they gravitate toward physical gold. And these are still kind of stores of value in those societies.
Why is understanding who controls the ledger very important, Lynn?
Right. So we think of money, at the end of the day, it's kind of a ledger, right? In either the literal sense or the abstract sense. So, you mentioned barter, for example. An example I use in the book is that when I was a young engineer, we would often go out to lunch, like me and my coworkers would go out to lunch, and we kind of take turns driving. And if someone at lunch doesn't have like enough cash on hand, back when people paid with cash more often, they would just say, hey, can you just cover this and I'll pay back tomorrow. Everybody kind of keeps track of this ledger of who's driving enough, who's not driving enough, who's, who owes who money. A lot of things are just kind of solved by having this like mental ledger, this kind of informal mental ledger between us. And that's how a lot of hunter-gatherers do it as well. There's basically this kind of like family and kin type of arrangement. As things formalized, we started putting things into literal ledgers. And commodities also serve as kind of a nature-governed ledger. So if we, for example, trade around gold and silver coins with each other, we're using nature as a ledger. We're using the fact that nature has kind of this governing process on how hard is it to mine gold and silver? What do you have to do to get more of it? What are its properties? So we're kind of trusting nature that those properties are going to remain consistent. That sometimes is violated. Like in those other commodities, they were fairly consistent, but then new technology comes along and they can kind of cheat the ledger, at least compared to everyone else's technology. So far, gold and silver has been really resistant to that, which is why they're still monetary commodities.
The renowned macroeconomic analyst Lynn Alden shared her insights on potential interest rate cuts, the current effects, and various scenarios for future adjustments. At the time of the discussion, Bitcoin was trading around $57,000, reflecting a 1% decline over the past 24 hours and a 6% decrease over the last 7 days. Alden provided a thorough analysis of the Federal Reserve's monetary policy decisions and their potential impact on sectors such as housing and employment, offering her perspective on its long-term sustainability and the possible economic consequences. If you find this video helpful, make sure you hit the like button and don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more valuable content. Thanks for watching.